difficult to believe anyone else will ever come close to the raw talent this man possesses. Everyone here is truly blessed to simply exist at the same time as this shining beacon of humanity. Now, some of you might be asking, Carl, isn't this guy a proven cheater and con artist? Isn't he currently being sued for fraud? Hasn't it been shown time and time again that he is a compulsive liar? Well, in response to those questions, I have only one thing to say. My feelings don't care about your facts. Sure, technically the evidence is conclusive, and yes, technically there is literally no physical way he didn't cheat, but at the same time, analyzing evidence is a very tricky business. You see, Billy Mitchell has a deeper understanding of how things work. So when you look at the evidence from his depth of knowledge, it's actually everyone else that's cheating, and he's the only one that's legit. Even if you didn't want to take Billy's word, there is no greater authority than the world's best Donkey Kong player. It is true that basically every single top Donkey Kong player is in agreement that Billy cheated, but the current world record holder has shockingly been a Billy Mitchell supporter ever since he was exposed. In fact, he even wrote an analysis of Billy's gameplay that Billy is using in his current lawsuit against Twin Galaxies in order to prove that he is innocent. Having the #1 ranked Kong player on his side was a huge win for Billy, but unfortunately for him, recently fallen apart. Not only has the current world record holder now publicly stated that Billy Mitchell did in fact use an emulator instead of official hardware, which would be cheating, but he is also now accusing him of extortion and is now working with the lawyer representing Twin Galaxies in the ongoing legal battle. Things are going from bad to worse for Billy, and in this video, we will break down exactly what happened. I really hope you enjoy. In this video, we're talking about the greatest video game player of all time. For a moment, let's talk about the greatest video game of all time, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends is a fantasy RPG that is basically the Billy Mitchell of video games, indisputably the best. Raid has over 600 champions. How many champions do you have? One of my favorite champions is Philippa Drakes. She's a legendary champ that you get for free after 180 days. She heals the entire team at the start of every turn, and because I have 2 of them, it pretty much makes my team unkillable. This month is Raid's 3-year anniversary, and alongside a bunch of events to celebrate, Raid has also finally introduced skins. I'm secretly a bit emo, so this is definitely my favorite. Now is the best time to start playing Raid, and if you click my link in the description or scan my QR code, you'll get a free starter pack worth almost $40. The pack contains 3 free champions and a bunch of XP brews. The treasure will be waiting for you here. Again, just click the link in the description and I will see you in the game. Since early 2018, it has been a well-known fact within the competitive Donkey Kong scene that Billy Mitchell cheated to achieve multiple world records. Most notably, the score of 1,047,000, which was featured in the documentary The King of Kong. This is why, since early 2018, Billy Mitchell has been banned from both Twin Galaxies and also the Donkey Kong Forum rankings, which are considered the official rankings by top players. While Billy does manage to keep a small flock of loyal supporters that do still believe he did cheat, within the Donkey Kong community itself, he really doesn't have anyone on his side. Every single player I've ever spoken to understands that the evidence is irrefutable, and it has been since the day it was discovered. But what's fascinating is that there was one player who was always supportive of Billy Mitchell, and this wasn't just any player, it was the best player. Robbie Lakeman is the current Donkey Kong world record holder with a score of 1,272,800 points. Since 2014, he has set 11 new world records, far more than anyone else in history. The next best is Hank Chien, who set 6 world records between 2010 and 2012. There is a strong case to be made that Robbie Lakeman is the greatest Donkey Kong player of all time, which is why it's so bizarre that for the past 4 years he has been rather outspoken in his support of Billy Mitchell. Robbie would voice his support across all social media platforms and often went head-to-head with Billy detractors. This has, understandably, caused some friction between Robbie and the rest of the community, which is a giant shame. It seems clear to me, and to the other players, that there must have been something else going on behind the scenes for this kind of cognitive dissonance to occur. If you think the evidence is clear to you, then it's only more apparent to the Donkey Kong players who understand the game. Robbie also helped Billy during the dispute over his world records on Twin Galaxies.
Wait!
Fritzland, over to spreadsheet showing that Billy Mitchell had extended luck on his records. Not only did he have more blue barrel smashes, which yield more points, but the average amount of points that he got from barrels was above normal as well. Wes stated that this was evidence of splicing, as it looked like Billy, or whoever was playing, was repeating levels over and over until they got the luck they needed. In response to this, Robbie wrote a 4-page analysis arguing that all of the
whatever I earn will be put towards the greater good. My good. Me.
I based this off of what I was able to create myself in such a short amount of time, and watching Billy play live in his only Commonwealth Championship, I can attest that these tapes are really playing, and that I do not see a reason why Billy would be computer stage or save states to film or games with this style of play. Robbie is obviously a smart dude, because in this conclusion is exactly what he was saying. He didn't want to say anything of substance. It's like that scene in the movie The Law-Abiding Citizen, where these suspects make intentionally vague statements that the prosecutor interprets as a confession, but upon closer inspection, he didn't actually admit to anything at all. So let's analyze that conclusion and bit deeper. He says that it's legitimate gameplay, which is a generic term that doesn't really mean anything specifically, and the gameplay itself is never the issue with Billy's tapes. It was the way the game grew on the screen that confirmed the case. Robbie states that the tapes were Billy playing, which we already know. He states that he doesn't see a reason why Billy would be using his name. It's not saying that he didn't use his name. It's just saying that he doesn't see the reason. It's a subtle difference, but it's very telling. Because one, in this conclusion, Robbie says the tape was not made, and there is a reason to say that, because it's false, and he knew it, which we will discover later. Now let's go this conclusion is also true states. During the investigation, an individual named Wes Copeland, who had posted a hostile comment about Mitchell 7 months earlier, provided the Galaxies a mathematical analysis which alleged that Mitchell edited the videotape of the records with save states, a method of gameplay manipulation, but according to Copeland's math, Mitchell would not have been so lucky to beat the scores. When Galaxies named 0 exactly the allegation, and the analysis led to the file false by Robert Lakeman, 8-time Commonwealth record holder. Lakeman concluded that Mitchell played on legitimate arcade
It's in our best interest to assist in any way we can. We don't want any more angry Russians.
Comment. In his exhibits, he shows this post, which reads, "The ref who verified these scores is not a credible witness and is a proven pathological liar. Who wrote the detailed answer a junior." This post has been a topic about
Perforated an eardrum.
What's that? Did someone say something? Points after the infamous sports squad video.
Who doesn't love a shopping spree?
All the evidence showing that all records were made was discovered. The ref, who has called a pathological liar, is our good friend.
Let's be honest, it's not as if I was going to say no to this. Dual wielding laser fire death has always been a personal thing. Have you learned nothing? In the short time that we have, this record that I can accomplish many things.
If you check his Twitter page right now, there is a real chance
True is obvious, but I think I'd rather just have one real good one.
If you are not blocked by Billy, you are in. I myself am blocked, but luckily after Billy sued me, he unblocked me so that
If I'm honest, I do enjoy all this attention. I have an enormous ego.
not have been so lucky to achieve the score. But if you actually read the post that Billy provided himself as evidence, Wes literally says that the information in the spreadsheet is purely circumstantial. He clarifies that when this combines with the discoveries, it's very telling. According to Wes, which is also in the same post provided by Billy, he had had the spreadsheet for around a year. But again, it was admittedly only circumstantial, and he didn't take any action on it or even bring it up until the main evidence was unearthed. You can start to see how Billy will literally provide a screenshot of the post and then lie about what it said. The lawsuit then states that Billy Mitchell played on legitimate arcade hardware. Again, it's just President said that this is a part of Twin Galaxies at all, and that Twin Galaxies never used as part of their decision making. So ultimately, it's completely meaningless. The only reason I'm talking about this now is because of an amazing turn of events that just happened. Claimed that Billy and his associate Neil Hernandez were trying to extort one of the witnesses by using sensitive information ahead of pain. Robbie explained that he finally came to his senses about Billy after he was hospitalized with COVID, and it seemed as though Billy didn't care and was even laughing at him while he was there. Apparently it clicked at that moment that he was being used himself, and he decided that he had enough. Robbie concluded his post by saying, "From the beginning of this whole thing, I didn't want to state an opinion on the matter because I just cared about the strategies Bill used, along with the numbers people said were too high. Proving West wrong was fun. I still stand by the numbers I presented, and I stayed true to the idea that save states wouldn't be needed to finish those games. I just didn't think someone would stoop so low as to extort witnesses to get their way. They also wanted to get some documentary made about the whole story, so it wouldn't surprise me if all the delays in courts were just for theater or content. We all know that video with the judge would insert into that and then find ways to use the courts to do more. That's my 2 cents on that, but if there was a way to just get this all thrown out,
That's cool, that's a little too close.
that round, and it looks worse. Do. Robbie said, details, talking, driving, now let's do this with Galaxy lawyer directly. That Billy did it back. One of the star witnesses, the best player in the world, the player that Billy himself was counting as an authority, has now publicly stated that emulation is used to protect. Things really can't get much worse from here. Billy already had 0% chance of winning, but some before. And the bad news doesn't end there. Back in October of last year, Billy Mitchell appeared at the Phoenix City Multicon, and at this event, he did one of the dumbest things he could have done. His goal was to get a perfect game of Pac-Man at the event, and by God, he managed to do it.
because one open world wasn't enough apparently, it needed a second one. Elden Ring isn't Dark Souls 4, it was Dark Souls 4, 5, and 6, all at once. I'd always imagined what would have balance, not in actuality for the developer that you could build them to, but in terms of emphasizing about what the rest of this would be like, I just wonder if it can forever. The constrained open world of these games give you the impression that you're cutting through the animated and dense slice of them on your adventure. Demon Souls is more the odd one out and feels like scattered pockets of the world were dumped into that could have a more plain open world connecting them if you were free. When I first played Elden Ring, because of how brilliantly the dungeon areas were integrated into the open areas, it felt like an uncompromising realization of that feeling. I could vividly imagine starting off with something like Stormveil Castle or Capital, and then fighting my way up to freedom and marveling at the unfolding world before me, as if I could do that for Endeavor as well as whatever is around it if the game was prepared for me to do so. To repeat, that's how it was when I was playing Elden Ring. Then I went back to Dark Souls 1 to see that it wasn't as unfocused as it thought. There are some areas that still maintain that quality, but traveling through Endeavor, Darkroot Garden, and Whitetown again made me understand that Elden Ring is closer to the standard formula than the fantasy I have about breaking the world wall in Dark Souls. Dark Souls 3 was also interesting in how it feels like a bunch of levels on platforms arranged like a series of awkwardly stacked plates on a tray, rather than a tangle of routes you're cutting through in an otherwise full world. I want to stress, though, that I don't hold this against Elden Ring as a flaw, since the illusion they created worked my first time through, and that's something I'm going to have to say a few more times in this video. The first run of this game is very different than any subsequent ones. It's an amazing feat of world design that traveling from zone to zone truly does evoke the same feeling of arriving at a new place in Dark Souls, and this is a quality that does endure after replaying the older games. With the possible exception of going from Limgrave to Caelid, I felt like I had achieved something or marked the new stage of my adventure when I arrived at a new place. More than that, most zones manage to have that same unveiling moment of wonder that new places in this series have, like stepping out from the catacombs in Dark Souls 3 to Gawk and Irithyll, the greeting the DLC areas give you in Dark Souls 2, the palace near the end of Sekiro, Inner Londo in Dark Souls 1, and if you've played these games, you know I can keep going. Despite being open world and giving you tremendous freedom to go anywhere you want at the start, to the extent that there are only a handful of regions that you can't get to within an hour if you know what you're doing, the game still manages to make you stop and prepare with these moments of grand reveal. Seeing Liurnia for the first time via the hidden path around Stormveil, or after beating Godric, cresting this hill with a strategically placed wall so you get to see more of Caelid all at once when you hop over it, or the confusion and wonderful dread you may feel if you get teleported here via an alternative route, which is something that can happen for a few more areas too. These are also carefully planned moments that you could have instead. The capital has the dragon corpse to wow you and still doesn't ruin your first time seeing the place from a distance. The faraway introduction you could have for crumbling Farum Azula might actually be a better holy shit moment than the main quest way that you arrive here. Seeing the grand lift for the first time, witnessing the capital, and then finding another lift later, and the game keeps going through a mist that clears to even more gorgeous real-time landscape paintings. Dungeon areas can elicit that fundamental Souls feeling too of getting through one stage, conquering a boss, and then having that victory trot area of stiffly skeletal connection that borders on nonsense, but still bridges the gap to the next stage of the zone, all the while making sense in the context of the open world around it. Yes, parts of the open world are empty and not always successful, but within this world there is still a bigger Dark Souls game of traditional levels and overlapping interlinked connections than in the others. This really is 2 or 3 games in one.
Are you good and prepared, young chum? The festival begins.
The Underground is largely responsible for that. For me, this was the best part of the game. It's also the most creative, and is the first time that From has returned to the high world design standard they set in the first half of Dark Souls 1. I can't believe that I can say that. Every time I went to the Underground, I was floored, either by the unexpected cavernous night sky, or the size of the place, or how it links together with other areas, or the method at which I arrived. 2 surprise elevator rides can get you there, or breaking through a wall after descending through the sewers of the capital, or hell, even the modest, and on paper, kind of boring teleport stone in the consecrated grounds had me happy because I had no idea there was more underground to even find, never mind that I was going to suddenly be plugged into it. The best of these was the change that happens to the world after beating Star Scourge Radahn. You're shown this odd cinematic of a meteor crashing somewhere, and at some point later, as you're riding around, you'll see the results of that impact. Let me set the stage here. At this point in my playthrough, I had already been to the underground twice. Both times through the elevator entrances in Limgrave and Liurnia. I knew from what I had seen in this location that I would find a way back down there eventually, but I wasn't sure if I would be able to reach some of the high places I had seen during my Sea Over River exploration. This newly formed path took me down there, with 3 separate sections to explore with 3 bosses, and a creative link back down to the lower section of this zone. Then I found a coffin transport system that I knew was going to take me to that section I had seen earlier when I was underneath Liurnia, where Dawn's meteor was the key for unlocking what I had seen before. And then the coffin took me to a brand new 3rd location of the underground instead. This kept going. There were 2 more coffins and transitions on this journey that all ended with one of the coolest looking bosses in the game and a mysterious locked path that you couldn't get through for dozens of more hours, and then solved another separate long-standing mystery I had when I did. For this entire stretch, Elden Ring was a 12 out of 10 for me. For a few hours, I felt like I was playing the best parts of Dark Souls 1 again. I never expected that From would ever pull that off and do something that could get me back to that feeling. There was a toxic swamp in this part, or Scarlet Rot as it's called in Elden Ring, and I enjoyed it. It was super poison, and I didn't care. Elden Ring is so good, it was almost the entrance to a part that I had already explored. This game is that the underground selfish and reasonable disappointment of the amount of completely is on par with Hollow Knight and the bargain. Elden Ring is a full price AAA game.
You bought me these chunks?
Huh?
You bought them for me?
Yep.
Oh, thanks, man.
The majority of these underground sections felt like the equivalent of the looser, more freeform levels found in From Souls games. So for me, they're legacy zones. Legacy in this case being the word that's been settled on for labeling areas in Elden Ring that are traditional Souls stuff and not a part of the open world. There are small side dungeons in this game in the form of catacombs and caves, but those aren't legacy dungeons like Stormveil Castle and the Academy of Raya Lucaria. Let's complain about Nintendo for a bit, because what would a Joseph Anderson video be without that? I hope Elden Ring will be the game that redeems my reputation for most of the people that didn't agree with it, because nothing proves it more than thinking about how much lesser an experience Elden Ring would be if these legacy dungeons were removed. Besides shrine-like mini dungeons with for a quick flash of a Souls-like experience. Sometimes it's hard to imagine the addition of something and how it would work, but it's usually easier to imagine if something was taken away. Do this to Elden Ring, and maybe you can understand why Breath of the Wild was such a letdown in this way. If this had happened, this video would be entitled Elden Ring, Not Enough Dark Souls. Time will tell how good these legacy dungeons hold up compared to the greatest hits of the series. I know already, however, that Stormveil Castle, Crumbling Far Missoula, Lindell, and its sewers will be contenders for the top. These dungeons are huge, sprawling, and complicated to navigate, with secrets and shortcuts hits of the series. I know already, however, that Stormveil Castle, Crumbling Far Missoula, Lindell, and its sewers will be contenders for the top. These dungeons are huge, sprawling, and complicated to navigate, with secrets and shortcuts and multiple overlapping links that reward experimentation and seeing how the geometry of the areas you can reach fits together. There are secrets I know I still haven't found in these places because I can see items I haven't been able to loot yet. Far Missoula may be more impressive visually, but its placement in the world means it doesn't have the same achievement that Stormveil and Lindell do by fitting naturally into the open world around them and still feeling like expansive Dark Souls levels, both with entrances and exits that make sense and bridge the player between 2 open world zones. And you can see it all from the outside as you ride around too. Simply a stunning achievement in game design. In summary, the open world successes are in how it captures that feeling of seeing something so majestic in scale in the distance and then actually being able to go there. In my Ring City review, I lamented that the game showed me a gorgeous city in the distance and then kept me from it, kept me isolated in one path and used that city as a background to it all. If Elden Ring shows you something, it lets you go there, and with only a few compromises and empty sections in its world, still feels true to its Souls roots. I don't know how they pulled this off and made it look so good when Dark Souls 3 still suffers from horrible LOD issues today, after receiving several patches trying to fix it too. You'd also be reasonable in thinking that another part of Brom's magic wouldn't survive the transfer to this new format, specially designed and focused, guaranteed experiences. These aren't always flashy, and that just goes to prove how purposeful they are and how hard they hit. Remember, this is a series in which one of the most famous and riveting moments that virtually everyone has when they play is kicking down a ladder after crossing a bridge. There's a dragon involved in this scenario, and yet the ladder stands out more. How can an open world facilitate that kind of thing?
Oh, no one thinking ads coming. Hey, Mark, with YouTube Premium, there are no ads. Keep going, little daddy. Get YouTube Premium. All YouTube, no interruptions.
Well, this is why the game can't be played more than once to full effect. Elden Ring expertly uses funneling systems with connections between zones and boss fights, and returning to dungeons having one main entrance to still provide these singular experiences. And in the case that there is an alternative path or route, that also has been made to be an equally powerful moment. Just like Hollow Knight could use its many entrances and exits to some areas effectively, but still differently, depending on the path you ended up taking. Whether you climb the cave route between Liurnia and Altus, or gather the two halves of the Grand Lift Medallion and have that as your welcome, you are having a memorable part of your journey that will sit as a milestone. There's even a third, weirder way to get here too. A game about revelations and information like this, how the world works and looks and fits together, cannot be done twice. Dark Souls is like this with its putting together of the world and how you make a map of it in your head as you're on your adventure. Bloodborne but also reflects the first that there are a lot of things. Consider that for Elden Ring, some of your favorite moments on your first playthrough may end up being tedious your second or third time. The wonderment you felt while the elevator ride took 5 times longer than you expected may turn to impatience and boredom when you return to Sea Over River. Replay value isn't the most important metric to judge a game for me. I don't know how most people feel about it, but I consider something that the first playthrough of a game is the most important one. In Brom's other games, replayability came from doing different builds and the fun of fighting the bosses again, which can be a test of skill that you can repeat or enjoy the expression of mastery. Even in Sekiro, which is arguably the least replayable of the set of games due to it only having one weapon type, you can enjoy struggling with boss fights multiple times and then enjoy feeling like a god when it's effortless. Not that I've ever had that because I'm not very good at Sekiro. Some of this applies to Elden Ring, but because of how the content is distributed, I'd argue that in many ways this game is the least replayable in the series, despite having the most possible diversity. It's like the opposite version of Sekiro. There they double down on combat complexity with one element set with additional complementary choices that affect difficulty curve, whereas in Elden Ring, dozens of things to fight and so much of it in order. In that respect, the game is very undeniably replayable. In every other respect, it's time to get negative. My 5 big Shiriri gripes with Elden Ring in ascending order of importance are boring exploration rewards, boring shrine dungeons, recycled content, level balancing, and the prompts and bosses I've lost aka the combat changes. As always with the big game remakes, this is going to be difficult to clearly go through as many of these games are connected, sometimes in surprising, unexpected ways. of the first three zones, Elden Ring is the only game that's allowed to have that feeling. Like in our own we're now letting you look at it with $100 engagement. Market sacrifice of your Godric, one of my favorite ones in the game, is repeating casually in an ever-changing way. There are about 8 bosses for Elden Ring. That number has been maybe close to 200 if you consider that some encounters with enemies without Final Health Bars is still a boss. The total Knights of Rugby is around 10, but if you take stuff like the Grail Mercy Ability encounter, not all reuse is bad, of course, and some bosses also come back later with an enhanced set. So the amount of unique boss content is a little tricky to gauge, but still on the low side considering the size of the game, in my opinion. This doesn't bother me that much, and in some cases I even like it because enemy witness moments are fun to experience, but there is a distinct lack of event-level encounters in the game as a whole, and the recycling doesn't stop there. In fact, it transcends both the enemies and the limits of this game. An odd thing I love about Elden Ring is how artificial growth feels in a deliberate way, not in a it's obvious this is the game way. Lands really feel like a free world, like you could Halo. At the edges of many of this, you can see that the natural stone of the Mortal sort of feel ruins with me. Couple this with the revelation of the Eternal City and deeper ruins of the underworld, and you get the impression that these constructs are the actual real nature of this place. All of the natural land is like a growth on top of it that can be worn away at once. I don't know if that's the intent, but that's how it felt to me. The contemporary semblance we visit in this game are full of artificial land on top of older ruins that are stacked on even older ruins, as if there's a constructed engine and some more palaces where the stone constructs the entire world. It's ruins all the way down. This actually fits quite well with the other impression I get from Elden Ring and how it relates to other From games. This is like Dark Souls Afterlife, whereas Dark Souls 3 did present an authentic bloodshed grinding Ash, Elden Ring is like another big name version of this universe. It is where all the companies you have played ended up after playing those games. Some of them have gone through some sort of corrupted evolution. I'm sorry if any of you have been annoyed that I keep calling the fact Dark Souls when it's not in the name of the game, but the identity of that series runs deep in Elden Ring, not just in combat themes, but also in actual content. Many weapons and animations and enemies were reused, and some were even skinned from those games. For some that were, it took me too long to realize the tree fragments are Silent Ruins, and that the little gargoyle from Catacomb is a small hat ambushes from Dark Souls 3. I'm not saying that this is a bad thing in every case, or that these games are chronologically linked and actually exist in the same universe, although that could possibly be the case, I guess, only that they share much of the same DNA. The unceremonious placement of the Shrine Dungeons feeds off this artificial feeling of the worlds. Then you get inside, and that all melts away. The same enemies over and over, the same rooms over and over, the same elevator shafts to the point that they have the same pattern of ledges to walk and jump down, and a huge variance on what kind of boss you're going to get. I don't think this feature is finished, and I suspect they were meant to be randomized like Chalice Dungeons, which is what they feel like right now, only worse. Chalice Dungeons are a feature in Bloodborne that allowed you to use materials to spawn a procedurally generated dungeon with a boss, a lot more, a switch somewhere that opens it, a neat little bundle of rooms, sometimes even with shortcuts, and a helping of different enemy types. I liked this feature, but I didn't love it because it wasn't developed enough. It would have still been better to do this again for Elden Ring than what we got, since there is somehow more repetition in most of these caves and catacombs than what a generator can do. And that is so very true when it comes to the enemies found in these things and the layout for most caves. There are some of these that are fun. The tricky fake catacombs and some of the more open cave systems especially. These feel like what they were all meant to be, but they didn't have time to flesh it out, or most tragically, maybe most of these were randomly generated and they set these in stone because of loading issues or due to time constraints, and they just didn't randomize the enemy types enough. This hurts replayability more than anything because now you know which ones are boring, which is most of them, and so a huge swath of content that you choose somewhat independently through your first time is now gone forever. Randomizing this, especially with enemy types and traps, would have gone a long way here. I hope this demonstrates well the different types of recycling and how it can be used. It's a bit difficult to wrap your mind around that not all good content makes good recycled content, and not all bad content is bad when reused. A game full of randomized dungeons would likely be disappointing, but as a side distraction, dragon in this This felt like something out of a movie. I was a knight on a steed galloping through the fire and flames to get at the huge monster, and that's the face. There was a great back and forth between the end, turning again, getting knocked off my horse, and then calling it again to ride back into battle in a way that made Dragonfly play feel awesome instead of tedious. Rom has always had this issue with dragon fights. Their aerial attacks become boring because outward and in comparison to that, here's Elden Ring talks about Go Get a Tiger. The boss was amazing and is in my top 5 bosses of all time for the experience it provided. It is what I would like to be able to say, because the game ruined this by making you fight what feels like dozens of these, just over and over with the same dragon fight that was always identical except for the element of its purpose.
It is visible contact you see, then visible contact you shall receive.
All the giant enemies that have been on screen in these games, and just like that, these were boring. And so the first fight, retroactively,
Being shielded from the fires of hell is
later
not
larger
I knew that would happen, but even so, the noise gave me
radically that not reliably like theaters was even offering myself above this while I thought I needed to because of the facts that I couldn't see. This is a trend with the Giants as well, and most of the
I am feeling proud knowing that I was the real pilot.
it's amazing how deep we improved by removing a bunch of dragons. Something out and stay better.
It's more than a little slap. Rattle this doctor.
Outside of bosses, there are
I am surrounded by fools, both living and sadly, this will not allow me to prolong their suffering.
the ruins of the force defenders here with the same kind of buildings for arrangement in chests and the set of stairs to protect a chest or fight in that you see how much this devotion to content like every jail in churches, and while it's not offensive to that or anything, it does show signs of look out for the enemy that want it. Most mariners' death birds are also good examples of numbers that are often surprises you for still for the first time, especially before after you might form them over and over and over. But that's not to say that all quite special comments, it's just that much of these pick up exposure, and I'll just move yourself in the line with all those down to the boss fight like you've never seen before. Or anything, just something with one number that looks wonderful because of how weird it is. You can find a hidden village in the south of Area, wonder about what happened here, and hit a suspicious body after the down piece for some purpose you won't understand for 50 hours if you're taking your time. You can see a group of zombies on the coast of Wiki, you can see the levies on bird toward the tide, and spot the shipwrecks on the horizon that they are being called back to. The world has many moments like this, but that doesn't mean it's untarnished by the typical open world copy-and-paste technique of filling in an otherwise empty landscape. This reuse and recycling is also why many players who finish a game are saying it's too big. You can happily go through all the games in the series and not feel that way, and yet this one on its own can start to drag toward the end. Personally, I felt that in the final 2 areas, but not in the final legacy dungeons, which illustrates pretty clearly that it's a problem born out of repetition. The side dungeons became fewer and farther between, but also weren't evolving enough and doing new things, and the enemy variety tanks out of the capital section. Brand new enemies, I think, that are also similar to others you've seen already. The snowy mountains before the fire giants show this best with enemies from Caelid being spammed, which is another reason
I'm sure it will be delicious. I'm an alchemist.
I can't find the last valve.
Could be useless anyway.
I know I can't find the cable valve.
Which brings us nicely to another point on the list: disappointing rewards. With great build diversity and great and its world-defined Elden Ring.
Nice. Harvey, that's the one I'm missing, but I don't know what that is.
Staggering amount of spells, weapons.
The valve is.
Go, it's either going to drop at Dragon Command Tank Station. Should open that link, probably in the mystery box, in the Dragon Command on the top floor. And those air vent locations can be seen in the Zanzibar.
It's right there. Where is it?
There are weapon arts too, also known as spells. In theory, placing the majority of these around the world is fine tuning a good thing since they're practical, tangible rewards, but in practice, it means that every player is going to get sweet fucking nothing from most shrine dungeons, stone sword rooms, and even some of the legacy loot chests. The most disheartening moment for me was in my beloved underground stretch when I fought through a quick gauntlet in Noxtella for the big prize to be a talisman that increases spell slots for my guy who never used a single speck of magic ever. Like investing into crypto, this is simply a numbers game in which everyone loses. The scarlet brain rot that some people have contracted about build mandates in this game is something we'll speak about in the combat section, but for now, I just want to make it clear that even a theoretical perfect player who is somehow using both a slow weapon and a fast weapon with a shield and a seal or staff, like some psychopath who loves Randy so much they want to fill up every hand slot, is still going to find the overwhelming majority of these rewards do not apply to what they're doing. You can't upgrade that many weapons or shields, most talismans simply aren't that broadly applicable, and the different schools of casting require different loadouts and stat investments. And this is all before you get into the idea of committing to a type of build that appeals to you, what almost everyone does when they play these games. Most of this shit is a waste of time. This really diminishes the excitement of completing a dungeon after you knock out your first few, especially with the relentless stuffing of the new Ash Ketchum-All Spirit Pokemon summons down your throat. It's even worse on your later playthroughs when you will now plan which dungeons are worth getting up, like a formal strategy of which aisles you're walking down in the grocery store to get the good stuff and skip the bad as quickly as possible. This compounds with the poor nature of the shrine dungeons and, most unfortunately, Elden Ring's introduction of a horse. See, it's not just more formal loot chests and side areas that suffer here, it's also pretty much every single enemy. While the activity of Dark Souls experience here in the legacy areas
So assy.
checkpoint brace bonfires everywhere
How does he hurt all? Make it easy.
and refills for full clearing groups. The intent
Oh,
here
obvious.
is wonderful. Forcing players to go back to a checkpoint for more sustainable and boring when you're allowed to wander so freely, and so the usual check mistakes versus improvement isn't necessary for the healing system here. You can also holistically do things while on horseback, and I hope whoever pushed for that at From gets a statue in the lobby of themselves on horseback, picking up their crown. But the most beautiful things to find in the open world are almost always in churches and Erd Tree saplings, healing charges, and healing power upgrades from the tiers. The amount of rune souls you get from normal enemies throughout most of the game is a pittance and simply not worth the effort. Rare drops from these enemies really are rare and also require you to break some sort of rule and look up loot tables if you want something in particular, which I did for a shield test I wanted to perform after my 3 runs and spent over an hour killing the same guys until it dropped. End result is that you start to ride past a lot of enemies in the world, which will lead into a habit of running past enemies in the dungeons as well. You stop respecting the content. You could also start doing this in the previous games, but while this may just be an odd moment of hypocritical gameplay on my part, I find it a lot easier to justify exploring most of the levels in the past games because much of it is usually on the way already. And if you are intent on sprinting through content, there's a hell of a lot less you need to rush through. For some instances where I do skip, like the loop back around in a Deadberg for the crossbow, or something like the 3 tree demon monster things in the Dark Souls 3 Swamp, I'm not cutting much content out, and in the inverse event that these are something that I need, they're also not that far out of the way either from the path I need to take anyway. In my opinion, the game needed more universal rewards to populate the world that could have been bundled in with the ones already in the game, especially for the shrine dungeons. These are fairly easy to suggest, so I'll just list them off. Permanent passive stat increases, which also help promote players trying some complementary build stuff like adding a spell or trialing a weapon they may otherwise not have been able to use. This would require a few balance tweaks for power in the world progression, of course, but that's already a huge issue that we'll be getting to momentarily. Clothing sets and cosmetics. Players like getting these, and I don't understand why the game is so stingy with armor in particular, and then dumps an entire set on you all at once here and there. Add a room in the round table hold with a bunch of mannequins that are automatically set to wear each set of armor you find, and you have yourself a hook baited for completionists to be excited about. People show off collections, can have more options to wear them too, and it's relatively easy to implement. Talisman and armor upgrade materials. This is another no-brainer, although if for some reason From doesn't want players upgrading armor anymore, they can just stick to talismans. The game kind of has this already with finding better versions of some talismans, but they're few and far between. Finding a talisman that your build was unwanted to be made exciting because every talisman needs some upgrade materials, so you still get some power, especially of course, something you are using. Force upgrades. Torrent is a core part of the game and sorely neglected. Not only does this dash desperately need some iframes to slow down combat, you can also have some armor to increase, some health or passive regen from a separate talisman frame system, of course, and some stamina stuff. Some Bloodborne style weapon gens or give you chances to throw armor would also work. This one is pretty self-explanatory, so I won't waste their time with it, but just to be clear, doing all of these would be overkill, but just like when I played with Showdown, I was shocked at the point. These suggestions also only work for improving your first playthrough, and they're actually even worse on the ones that didn't use that much of the shrine content and already for progression power. So this would have to be coupled with improvements and more recommendations to that content. The built-in randomizer would be wonderful actually as another way to keep things fresh. Remember that rewards in these games are kind of like the activity you're doing on an outing with friends. Hanging out with the people you like the most and the real fun you're having, but the thing you are doing, whether that's a great restaurant, can only add to the experience. The combat and gameplay.
So, the generator round you are on right now, because in 2 rounds' time you will have to come back to the egg. While you're in that egg lockdown getting kills, a Valkyrie drone will spawn in. Killing that Valkyrie drone will turn on the generator. Now the generator's done, make your way back to the map. Your job is now to find a green light and find a code cylinder. These are inside of air vents, and those air vent locations can be seen inside of the armor store on the top floor, inside of the armory also on the top floor, inside the supply depot in the mystery box, in the Dragon Command on the top floor, in the infirmary at the back of the room, and in the tank station on the left wall. Now for this step, there's a link.
Weapons, shield upgrades, spells, shields, spells, talismans, spells, armor, swoop, poking around in Limgrave, meeting the Cyclones, and then run through around Stormvale Castle to the area before leaving Margit. I did a small survey of the zone, found a new sword, and then went back to kill him. I also saw a bit of Caelid before this as well, but I didn't engage with the contents. By the time I was finished with Stormvale Castle and got ready, I was level 32 and had a plus say that while complete authorization is a lot more fun when you don't feel like you accidentally correct on cheat mode, but I also have to add that I skipped a lot of content in those runs, so clearly I was still feeling pretty powerful before I got into the last third of the game. My suggestions for the problem are extreme, but honestly, I don't know what else I can say. It's a fundamental problem with open world progression that no one has properly yet. I think Skyrim has fixed it pretty early and did level scaling so poorly that now other devs seem afraid to do it with association, as an option to toggle in the menu or in relative levels make areas scale up a little around two levels below you so you can still follow over while having more friction in fights isn't the worst idea. Scaling things down isn't necessary, I think, so you can still find areas that you can yet and can challenge yourself or come back later. But I'm incentivized and more excited and punished for it by updating so much content. I can't help but think that this is not wrong. This issue is so bad that I don't level up for on that race points or even boss orders. The game cuts both ways. Sometimes you can throw yourself into things and it's a good experience. It's difficult. That's what these games are, right? And other times you don't know that you're overpowered yourself above areas you haven't pushed into exploring yet. Principal combat in this series kind of works against the format here in a way that I always love. You are able to pretty much anything at the beginning of the game in order to block yourself up enough. It does help, and you can hit some walls if you don't feel like bashing your head against it, but it's not outright impossible like it is in other open world games, except for maybe a couple of fights that require very specific strategy. Most games don't have good combat and maybe impossible like it is in some other open world games, except for maybe a couple of fights that require some very specific strategies. Most open world games don't have good combat, and maybe it's for this reason. The level limitation is so important that it grows to define the combat so much that it naturally erodes any skill-based intentions that the developers may have had when they originally started making the game. Elden Ring may have opened Pandora's box here by breaking this trend, since now every open world game's combat is going to be compared to it. If they could do good combat in open world, why can't you, literally any other developer out there? It's not fair, but that's an issue for future Joe. Anyway, this freedom also means that you can destroy level progression through the areas because the game allows you to, which I say is a failing on From's part to account for this possibility with either signposting level ranges or any scaling, or a better idea that exists that I can't think of because I'm not a genius game designer working at From Software, and I never will be. Which brings us to the final topic of this video and the biggest issue on my list, that I don't work for From Software. No, combat changes that were made. I saved the worst for last, just like the game does. Let's open this up with a question. There is obviously a right way to play games like this, in terms of build decisions, playstyles, and fighting strategies. These games are always built around this singular intended experience, and if you deviate from that type, then you are playing the game wrong, and your time with it is invalidated. My question to you is, what playstyle is that? Your answer will say a lot about how you approach these games. You may also be wrong, because there is an objectively correct take here. If you've been watching how I play in the majority of my footage, then you may already know what that answer is, and yes, this paragraph of the script I'm reading aloud right now is here just so the question has time to simmer before I reveal that answer. You're looking great, by the way. It's been a while, I know, so how do you mother for me? The answer is a melee build with no spells. No, it's whatever you have fun with. Whatever that means to you can change the game drastically, and how you kill the boss may feel like an entirely different game than the one someone else played, but as long as you're having fun, who cares? This also extends to pretty much every single game out there, by the way. If you play with cheats and you have fun, then you had fun. You're playing the game, you're having fun. Who gives a shit? I don't understand why everyone is so fucking wrapped up in this debate and shit when it is such an obvious answer. If you're having fun, you're playing the game right. That doesn't mean we have all comparative experiences, but, like, holy shit, guys, can we just move past this? Anyway, my approach to these games is from 3 simple rules. I must kill the boss myself. If I am dealing damage, I must also be risking receiving damage, although I fudge that a little bit here and there, and I don't use anything non-renewable during fights, unless strictly necessary. I may do other runs later that don't abide by these, but this is how I like to do my first playthrough, so I can dig into fights and have a pleasant struggle learning mechanics and then overcoming them. If you are on the opposite end of my method and enjoy destroying bosses by using every trick and ability available to you, safely casting magic, tailoring your gear to maximize defenses and exploit the boss's weaknesses, and summoning a friend or using an ash spirit, then if that's fun to you, then that's great. Your playstyle is valid, and your boss kill is valid. It's just that we're playing entirely different games at that point and don't share much in common to compare experiences. We're like two people that went to the gym and did different workouts. We can tell each other how we feel as we leave, but because we did totally different things, we can't compare them fairly. But we don't have to. The open world and these build and playstyle choices are Elden Ring's way of providing difficulty options, accessibility methods, and also more fun ways to play for different people. And there's a beauty here.
A light beer with this much flavor should be kept in a secure location, like your hand. I was already keeping mine. Light side, from the makers of the Saber and the Step.
The inside of the department store on the top floor, inside of the armory also on the top floor. Now, for the Kronos with 6 here, the next trophy can be found outside of the supply depot by putting the Red Dragon down and placing it down the count out of block. When you get the Red Dragon from the tank station back to the Hacker Lunch, now you roll all dragons on ground 14. You have to collect the wins upstairs in the department store. Big troops way down outside the store. When you get to the Red Lunch area, go to the toilets and your final trophy will be
Easy are ones that other people find difficult, so it's not always the same thing, although in general there are some easier methods than others. The Dark Souls games have always had this to some extent, with kindling bonfires in Dark Souls 1 being one of the best difficulty selection methods of all time, because it's so easy to understand, so easy to use, and the base level is still a good amount of difficulty, and at the top level, it's not exactly a pushover either with that much healing. It's a great way of doing things, and for that reason I don't understand why these games are the ones that the difficulty and gaming discussion orbits around when they do have easy modes already. They do! I don't get it, sorry, I'm going off script. My playstyle is not the best one, but it is the best for me. Elden Ring is simultaneously the most difficult and the easiest game FromSoft has made because of this. It is easier to collect fighting options than ever, easier to get a summon to help than ever, easier to grind out levels for power than ever, and even not feel like you're grinding that much at all while doing so because there's just so much side content to do. You can still fight bosses at level 1 naked with your bare fists if you like, and the range of difficulty that starts around there all the way up to using everything you can possibly cram onto your character is a great thing. Not perfect, of course, but great. Pretty much everyone does this naturally as they play these games. Either they understand them enough to go for a type of challenge mode or easy mode, or they like the idea of role-playing a type of character and stick within the bounds of what that character would be capable of. The starting classes are proof of this, and also a great way to get into this mindset. There can still be some problems here with difficulty on your first time through not being set right for some playstyles, either too easy or too hard, but that's another problem made worse with open world level balancing and might actually be outright impossible to solve effectively in a game with this much freedom. Some responsibility is always going to be on the player to get this right, and not always on the game developer, but hey, From's guilty here too. So then why is my biggest issue with the game related to this? Well, simply put, Elden Ring made me feel like I was playing the game wrong, and that my playstyle and choices that I used for all the other games in this series were no longer valid. Let's do a big rewind back through the whole series. Firstly, though, I want to quickly justify lumping these games together because Sekiro is obviously quite different from the others, and Elden Ring is too. Souls-like is a weird word, and it isn't exactly one I'm fond of because it's semantically awkward, but it's stuck and become a standardized term. Some people argue against it because they don't realize that it's made up of two equally important parts. They just see the souls and not the like. Like doesn't mean identical. It's also not clone either. It means just that. The games are alike. They share enough similarities that they can be comfortably grouped in proximity with each other as a subgenre. The use of difficulty, bonfire type checkpoints, high commitment attacks, some sort of Estus blast that refreshes on death, bloodstains, stamina systems, atmosphere, fog doors, themes, even the scale of the world and how the camera feels to operate while playing. There are so many other elements too that can be thrown in here, but the basic gist is that if you have enough of these, but not all, then you can say the game is a Souls-like. Just in the same way that you can say Fallout 4 and Doom Eternal are both first-person shooters, obviously, but they are incredibly different games. If these games were in a genre that were just emerging right now, like if we were in an alternative timeline where first-person shooters were only just being made, then I guarantee you that these two would be having the same kind of discussions that we have right now about Souls-like. These aren't comparable, we can't put these in the same thing, and yeah, I get it, but, you know, genres are dumb and they're just there for classifications, we just need to move on. So many off-script moments in this one, Streamer Joe's coming through. Again, Sekiro is the clear outlier here and the closest of these from breaking away from the realm of Souls-likes, but it's easy to forget that Dark Souls 2, Bloodborne, and Demon Souls are also very different because of their healing systems. The way that healing works in games is one of the most important things for dictating how the game can function in terms of not just difficulty, but also constructing gameplay. I've said this a few times in past videos already, so I'll be quick. Well, for me. Your health bar in any game is the amount of mistakes you are allowed to make before you have to retry. If the game is generous with checkpoints and has very short challenges, then those mistakes might be limited to one, like in Celeste. If your game has a healing system, then this changes the health bar to being short-term mistakes, and your healing is the system that refills them, long-term mistakes. So if you have virtually unlimited healing that can be applied instantly with no downside, like in Wild, the only way to lose is by making short-term mistakes without realizing heal or limiting your body a healing system. Other games that have automatically regenerating health encourage you to take different modes, go offensive and risk taking damage, and then play a simply defensive for a bit. Your short-term mistakes mean your health up again, and you can jump back into the fight. This can actually be a very thrilling system if done properly, but it is an extremely cannot mistakes in play are developed enough to feel like you're having fun, whether you are attacking or evading. Games like Hollow Knight combine both, and then you can be successful while offensive to prove that your ability to heal. Then there are games like Dark Souls, which instead train the potential mistakes you can make on your health bar and bundle them instead. If your HP is 4 or 5 mistakes, then your class may have 1 to 30, depending on the battle cycle. The trick is that you have to keep track of this, and similar to Hollow Knight, pick the correct opponent to heal, so it's not completely mindless. It's easy to understand how important this is if you imagine all of these allowed mistakes were given to you all at once. You wouldn't need to keep track of how many more because you could easily get frenzy on bosses and kill them before they could kill you. Bosses usually don't have a healing system because they are already in this game. You have to exploit all the mistakes they are allowed to make through their big health bars. This system is fantastic for difficult boss encounters and enemy gauntlets levels, since it means you can die very quickly if you're not playing well enough in a short window, but also isn't crushingly difficult if you do make a mistake here and there in a longer window of time. However, the healing found in this system is finite under most conditions. If you get a message rated up or get lucky after very other games back, but it's so rare that I'm going to dismiss it. The finite nature of the healing, coupled with the game's intent for high difficulty, so you feel like you've accomplished something by beating it, means that damage has to be avoidable for the game to function, fairly, or at all in my opinion. All damage has to be predictable and preventable. None of this has changed since my first video, and the challenge of the game is learning the ways you can predict enemy attacks and then get yourself out of harm's way while dealing damage back when you can. Dark Souls 2, Bloodborne, and Demon Souls aren't like this. They have effectively unlimited sources of healing through life gems, healing grass, and blood vials, which drop from enemies as you kill them. Bloodborne is technically the closest here because healing is more restricted in boss fights since you can't get more blood vials to drop while you're in them, but the regain recovery option to hit the boss back after taking damage in a vampiric vengeance is quite a potent way to stay alive on many fights. So it's Dark Souls 1, 3, and Elden Ring that predict the
So, Black Ops. Real quick. Elden Ring. Say older.
Elden Ring, it feels good.
Elden Ring. You want Elden Ring update?
Elden Ring, it feels good. Just
Elden Ring, it feels good.
Resistance is two types, melee and range. Spells that create damage zones on the floor I am including in the range category, although they're fairly rare. These categories can be combined because they follow the same potential flavors in how they can be constructed. The first is a straight sight. These are the bread and butter of Souls-like attacks.
Your performance was better than expected. Acknowledge. To begin phase 2.
And then dodge it when the attack starts to come at you. Think the most simple type of sword swings and projectiles that slowly come toward you, and you can time your response to when they get to you with a roll or a block or just moving out of the way, whatever you need to do. The second type are delayed snap attacks that you can feel out the timing on. These are trickier to explain, but you know what these are if you've played the game. The boss charges up a laser beam, and if you dodge it when the beam appears, you're too late. You just got hit. You need to dodge right before it by learning the timing from when you saw this attack a few times before this, and then repeat that test. Melee attacks can also be like this, with the enemy entering a stance which, after a set amount of time, releases like a loaded spring into an attack so fast that it's not reactable. You have to know the timing and dodge preemptively. Watch Dogs are a perfect example of this. With no exceptions that I can think of right now, every attack in these games is one of these two types, and an absurd amount of variety and different timings and twists are added on top of them. Even breath-based AoE attacks can either show up with a telegraph you respond to, or have a visual or audio telegraph that you learn the timing on and then dodge. Even Dark Souls 1 had this stuff with the side spike on Nito that you can sometimes run dodge, but it's better to roll it at a certain point in the screen telegraph that you learn is the best time to press dodge. Added on top of these two flavors are things like tracking attacks to ensure that you learn the timing instead of just strafe around the boss, short and long combos with a mixture of straightforward and delayed attacks so you can never be sure what you're going to get and have to learn the whole combo. Things sight readable or require a timing test for when you see the beginning of the animation. Grab attacks, which are some of the worst in these games that still obey these rules, kind of, but the inner and front of the enemy model becomes the attack instead of their arms or a weapon. Please stop making these from. Attacks that end.
Coachella, catch the live stream, follow the artists, go back.
What?
Only on YouTube.
Follow-up after trail means that your dodge has to be precisely timed to avoid both stages of the attack, or you need to dodge immediately again afterward. And while this list isn't exactly exhaustive, lastly we have a long assortment of very flashy moves involving charging at weapons and jumping in the air and the like, which are focusing on being visually impressive. This is the type Dark Souls 3 went hard into with teleports, spell effects, long jumps, and so on, all to dazzle you into thinking it's different types of attack, which works for the most part. Back in 2015, I said in my very first video on Dark Souls 1 that the combat in that game is deeply engaging and complex enough to feel rewarding. I still stand by that statement, but playing more games like this as they've come out has made me realize I didn't understand what I was truly enjoying in that game. The moveset on the player is quite limited, and it was the game's enemy and encounter variety that I was appreciating more in terms of depth. In terms of game feel, however, Dark Souls 1 is still excellent. Rock's done it better since, but it's easy to forget that the grounded melee combat with the stamina system in that game was unusual because it felt good. Most melee combat before that didn't, and the game still don't feel as good today. Playing Bloodborne and Nito made me understand that Dark Souls 1's success was mostly in its complexity on the enemy side. The problem that stems from this
entirety of the universe is fractured and
that this is quite a limited source for that complexity to continue with fresh variety over the course of many games in a whole new series. And so, quite naturally, FromSoft entered an arms race against itself. A literal arms race, really, because it's mostly been about how fast they can make the arms move for these enemy attacks. Dark Souls 1 and 2 allow you to dodge, roll, block, and physically move out of the way of some effects. That's all you can do, and be careful. Those who choose to block won't be doing much dodging, and those who typically choose to dodge won't be doing much blocking, period. This lack of responsibility is exactly where telegraph is very encounters with
going to kill next? There are so many of you!
But so have you. Even saying that, at the end of the game, you are being pressed by the that is either roll or block for defense again. The game receives some level of fight cards, sort of like other sets, but are quite varied or balanced around, so almost actually type of thing. I don't want to do a process. I like it a lot and think it particularly is a great spread of boss fights.
Did you enjoy it?
Despite the harsh limitations of what the responsive building counters around, they did a pretty good job while maintaining a high level of spectacle. Mostly, their teams with the quite clear. Series, double movements, and sister phase 2.
An interdimensional device has been identified. Do not concern yourself with its content. It is beyond your comprehension. Nor is its nature your concern. Security, strictly.
Especially stands out as the fight that
Model is being attacked.
That's the progression of how starts with one, plus one. But then when Sekiro shows up, on the opposite side, you only have one weapon, but that set has a whole tree of different weapon lines for
Let the singularity control you!
Many bosses have specific pieces
Okay, so that might be a hole in the fabric of space and time.
There's a variety of different builds in other games. The true master stroke is Sekiro's combat is that the defensive play is also part of your offensive capabilities. In a fight, you will be asked not to just dodge or block, but and getting better at timing each of these boss. You will also be listed on the directions of your dodges for counterattacking and responding to forward thrusts. And many fights also ask for you to do jumping responses and the occasional grapple. Compare this all to Dark Souls, where when a dragon fight asks you to run around the breath attack to hit its head instead of just slower dodge rolls, and you think, wow, feeling spicy tonight, huh, From Software? And unironically, enjoy the switch up. I think the improvement is clear. However, this keeps going. 9 times out of 10, you are also rewarded for aggressive play. Attacking the boss instead of staying neutral, either to deal damage or force them to deflect units from their move, is not just entirely valid, it's sometimes the best play. Dodging and then attacking is also better early in fights to get enemy health down so their posture bar damage builds up faster, so you're not always in the same thing. So remember that Sekiro doesn't have stamina in a traditional sense, so you can do
Can a company help you live better? We're not talking about just any company.
So you can do all of these moves and even run around and do as much as you like, and it's only when your posture bar is
expected. It is a life source that holds necessary information. Bring it to me. I will help it.
I have glimpsed so many. I expected no better from your kind. Enjoy your filthy fingers prodding me.
Attempting subject.
Nearing full, you need to slow down and hold the guard state to recover it. This means it's easy to sprint around lots of attacks that enemies have, but you won't want to because of the most important change Sekiro brings to the table. Dealing with enemy attacks head-on is a way of dealing damage to them. If you deflect every attack in an enemy combo, then you are filling up their posture bar and are inching closer to exposure to your death blow. There is a huge difference between start with one play cautiously while learning and then confidently to mastery. The result is different close to gameplay that's observed like that platformers like Celeste and Mario games and do Infernal's combat for how enjoyable it is. It's the first-person shooter of all time for exactly this kind of play. Either be in a hyper-aggressive state or a Neo 1 with the Matrix responsive state while fighting, and at the best moment you will be moving between them seamlessly. In Dark Souls, you can find yourself approaching combos and a memorization of when the boss does X move, I need to dodge instantly, then delay dodge, then dodge again, then delay dodge, and then I can attack. And while you certainly can't play Sekiro like that too, memorizing attack patterns, you can also just respond to everything that's coming at you on the fly, and feel like you're dueling instead of acting as an algorithm that knows the perfect way to deal with each attack as the boss puts it up. Sekiro is perfect about this. Criticism for that need to, and an unreleased video that's been lost in the channel, but it is far better about making its boss fights fun or feels about how you can enter this close to gameplay and for a unique balance around carefully measured decreases in power with fast and health upgrades and feel like Sekiro fights without understanding why Sekiro fights work so well, without updating the player tools enough to deal with them. It's like Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne thing all over again, although this time it's really, really applicable. If a boss can enter incredibly long combo chains before you get a chance to hit them, then it's important to make dealing with those combos a worthwhile experience and a fun experience. As we just went over, in Sekiro that works because every time a boss attacks you in that game, it's an opportunity to reverse the damage dealt back at them. In Elden Ring, if you dodge an attack, it just means you don't take damage, and also costs you stamina. So the longer the chains get between chances to counterattack, the more it makes sense to just stay away from the boss while it's
Keep your fetid flesh
afraid. You look familiar. Can't be you. From the Cosmodrome. Your faces are familiar, but different.
Let's get this over with quickly, shall we? I've been scratched before, believe me. I'm just a little busy right now. Oh my, what a wonderful weapon you are indeed, Mark III.
Stop it! Stop shooting! Let's help! What do you want?
Want to set you free, Flash?
Hey, here we go. No here. Anyone lost me?
Double points. Anomaly moving. Return to target.
I would very much like to see a big, blazing inferno dragon. Being shielded from the fires of hell is not something I'm used to. Hands are shaking with excitement. No, that's a Reagan number. My converter reset it. Never mind. Honestly, my palate hasn't been the same since we got here. I'm not sure that city will That's I am surrounded by fools, both living and dead.
Let's doing them and hit them at the end. Here's an enemy type that shows this beautifully because Sekiro has one just like it. In that game, this is an initially daunting but then surprisingly easy test for you to change a punch and then counter. In Elden Ring, you just stay away and block until it's done, and hopefully get a punish if it's done, maybe. If this was a one-off, then I'd be happy about it because it looks cool and it's kind of funny, but this spills over so hard into the boss design philosophy that I'm wondering what the hell happened to the team that designed Sekiro. How could a group that understood what makes a good combat system so well there not see the issues with Elden Ring? If a boss attacks 100 times in a row, and you're expected to dodge every swing, and only then, after all 100, get a chance to hit them, then I think we can all agree that's a problem. So how low does that number have to be before it's now a reasonable challenge? Because some of these bosses often enter states in this game of not being able to be safely attacked for well over 20 seconds, and in the case of the last boss jumping around so much, we can measure it in literal minutes. If the game wants long combos like this, then it needs a system that deals damage to the boss in some way as an incentive for me to risk dealing with it all head on. Especially so if the act of rolling it all means it's actually hurting my damage potential if I'm out of stamina by the end, which actually happened to me with an investment of over 40 endurance when it came to responding to some of these long attack chains. If I frame you through an attack meant the boss took stat damage or something, then now we're cooking. But I also realize at this point I am literally just describing Sekiro. Not only do the last set of bosses in this game attack for so long that it makes my videos look short, they also don't have clear and consistent punish windows afterward. Going back to Dark Souls 3, I was shocked to see how often I could safely be aggressive for neutral on bosses and between many of their combo swings, even with a big slow-ass weapon that you can see on the screen right now. Bosses in Elden Ring will do anime acrobatics for a whole episode, including chains that involve them taking off into the air, landing into an attack that explodes, and then taking off again into the air because they're still not done, like a plane coming into the runway and taking off again when they realize their landing gear is broken. Look, there are tons of other problems like this in the game that could be fixed, along with some grab boxes and hitboxes and all that usual shit, but the fundamental issue here is this. It is too often a dice roll guessing game of whether or not I can safely attack these bosses as a melee build. The first problem is that many of these long combos don't indicate clearly enough that they're done, either because they go on for much longer than you think, or combos can now bleed from one to another without much warning and you're just meant to watch, I guess. This is not only fine but great in Sekiro because it adds to the flow state you can enter between you and the boss, but in Elden Ring you don't have those tools. My second part of this problem is my biggest issue with the game, period, which is that some bosses have optional extensions on combos that they sometimes only do if you attack them. Picture this, you've worked out which attacks are punishable on a boss and you're finally feeling confident about taking them down. You've hit the boss after a specific combo ends a few times now, and that's the one you're sinking your sword into while you're learning how to exploit the rest of them. It's the 6th time in the fight that you've successfully dodged a string, you position yourself to attack, and then as you move on, the boss brings your aim back.
What have you done? Alarms. Self-destruct sequence activated. Disarm zone. Immediate. Hey. 3 minutes remaining.
Take the simplest.
Now for the it's going to flash lights up on this screen. You can pause after every single light it flashes, so you can write down what it says. Your job is to make your way to each place that it lights up, disabling the light terminal in those areas, and also in the correct order that they light up as well. The Dragon Command light is on the top floor on the left-hand side. The armory light is on
failed to disable the systems. I'm beginning to see a pattern.